Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Berkeley County Board of Education Budget Workshop. This Tuesday, February 23rd, I call the meeting to order, declare a quorum is present, and the media has been notified. This evening, we will hear from a couple of people, mainly our CFO, Ashley Smith, and also Dr. Kelly Wolf. So you are recognized at this time to present the proposed discussion items for the CARES Act money, the second phase of the CARES Act money. So, Ms. Smith, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. Good evening, Mr. Barrow, Dr. Ingram, and board members. I wanted to start out by saying that one of the pros of having a workshop is that we have the opportunity to discuss the recommendations of administration and also incorporate the ideas of the board members into our plan. Since we will not be voting on this tonight, this is all up for discussion and we can change this accordingly. We're going to start with some background information on the ESSER Fund. SERSA was signed into law on December the 27th, 2020. The U.S. Department of Education is providing an additional 54.
Ms. Smith, I left something out that should have happened. I did not ask for an agenda to be approved. Do we have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
We'll say Ms. Warford made that motion and Ms. Littleton had the second. Any discussion? In favor, raise your hand. Unanimous consent, 8-0. I apologize. Ms. Smith, you are recognized again.
May I unpause? Okay. So the U.S. Department of Education is providing additional $54.3 billion to the ESSER II fund. As you will see later in the presentation, our share of this estimated amount is $32 million. The U.S. Department of Education awarded grants for the purpose of providing local educational agencies with emergency relief funds to address the impact of COVID-19 on elementary and secondary schools. So as a couple of the grant specifics, the ESSER II grant has a few requirements. We are not required to complete a new application, but we do need to submit a spending plan and sign a new GAN. We are not required to use ESSER II funds on equitable services. Funds must be spent by September 30th, 2023. We should spend our ESSER I funds first before spending our ESSER II funds. The ESSER I funds are what we call our CARES Act money. And our estimated amount is $32.2 million. So the original ESSER I funds had 12 allowable uses, which are listed on the next two slides, and the ESSER funds have the same 12 plus 3 additional categories. The 12 categories listed here: activities authorized by ESEA, supplies, sanitizing, training procedures, and closures related to COVID-19, providing resources to school leaders, and activities that address the needs of low-income children, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth. It also covers technology for our students, mental health resources, and summer and after-school programs and other activities to maintain continuity of service. So the 3 new categories is where our main focus will be this evening. The 3 new categories address learning loss, school facilities and repairs and improvements, and projects that improve indoor air quality in school facilities. We're going to start off tonight with a presentation from Academics and Innovation to share their ideas and plans addressing learning loss for our students. I'm going to turn this over to Kelly Wolf and her team at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, Chair Barrow, Dr. Ingram, members of the board. At this time, I would like to recognize 2 teachers to present our BCSD Roadmap to Acceleration, Stephanie Piegler from Berkeley High School and Amy Hardison.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Barrow, Mr. Barrow, Dr. Ingram, members of the board and cabinet. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's our kids. At the end of the day, I love what I do, and so I'm very excited about talking to you about the BCSE Roadmap to Acceleration tonight. But before I get started, I kind of want to give you a backstory, kind of how I became the person to present to you tonight. So it all started with a conversation. What are we going to do with these kiddos when they come back in August? What are we going to do to really meet their needs? Because in some cases, we're looking at some kids who haven't been in a traditional classroom for 18 months whenever they return to the classroom. 18 months. So how are we going to deal with this learning loss? How are we going to deal with the needs of these kids when they come back? And so it started out, as teachers always do, just chatting and talking. And from there, it turned into, but really, what are we going to do? And so from there, we started talking, and then we called Dr. Wolf. And we came up with a plan, and we said, what do you think? Do you think that's something we can do? And then from there, from talking to Dr. Wolf, we talked to various principals around the district to see, is this something you guys can do in your buildings? Can this work? And then from there, we said, teachers, is this something you can do? Do you think this is something that we can implement in Berkeley County School District and truly be able to do with fidelity? And pretty much everyone I'm hearing is, yes, let's do this. So from here, I will now present to you the BCSD Roadmap to Acceleration. So the data. Here's the data kind of, before you take a step forward, you got to do a needs assessment. So here's our data currently that we have from the 2020-2021 data update. If you look, the number of students failing one or more courses has increased quite a bit from quarter one to quarter two. If you look at the elementary school, failures have increased, 377 students failing from quarter one to quarter two. If you look at the middle school level, the failure rate has increased to 953 students from quarter one to quarter two. And at the high school level, we're looking at 1,559 students who have failed one or more courses from quarter one to quarter two. And then taking another deep dive, 3,962 high school students have failed one or more courses at the end of the first semester, meaning they did not receive credit for that course. So looking at this data, clearly the data is showing us that we must put into place a multi-phase educational solution. District-wide initiative that has to be able to meet the needs of our kids, grades K through 12. And so the BCSD roadmap is going to have 4 parts, and I'm going to go over every part with you tonight. The bridge standards, accelerate learning, support and enhancement, and then parent engagement. So, bridging grade level standards. What we really want to do here is address the essential standards for grades K through 12 in ELA and mathematics. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the absolute essential standards for our kids to move forward in their learning. I want you to, if you take a second to look at ELA or mathematics standards in any single grade level, the amount of standards teachers are supposed to go through in 1 year is astronomical. It's almost impossible. I teach US history, and it's tough. It's tough to get through every single standard by the end of the year. So really and truly what bridge grade level standards are gonna do for us is allow teachers to focus in on the absolute essentials for our students to meet their needs. And so the next step to this would be, how do you develop that and how do you come up with that plan? Teachers in our school district are going to be the ones who are going to develop this, where they're going to be the ones who determine what are these grade level access points. What are the areas that our kids in Berkeley County School District need to focus in on so that we get the essentials for them to be a grade level. So the acceleration program is going to be meeting the needs for 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade in the subject areas of ELA and mathematics. What's different about this is it is a very focused, targeted education for our students. These are critical transitional years in our children's education. The acceleration program is going to be an infusion into the 3rd, 5th, and 8th grades. And it's going to be a personalized, project-based, interdisciplinary, competency-based education for our students. This is going to be targeted acceleration of student learning that will be including diagnostic assessments, data collection, project-based learning, and hands-on manipulatives. Teachers and administrators are also going to be super involved, and they're going to receive lots of professional development that will be ongoing throughout the school year. Teachers are going to have support, they're going to have coaching, so that we ensure that our teachers feel confident that they can truly implement this so that we can actually meet the needs of our kids. Support and enhancement is the next step to this process, where we want to ensure that we have equitable support for all of our students in all grade levels. So some of the programs we would like to utilize and our schools will have offered for them For equitable support will be a couple of these programs, LLI, which is known as Level Literacy and Intervention, Bridges Math, MyPath Reading, Edgenuity, Lexia Core, and Lexia Power Up. Some of the programs we would like to utilize and offer schools to ensure that we're also meeting and providing social and emotional support for our students are going to be Edgenuity Purpose Prep, Pearson 360, Restorative Practice, Check Connect, Check In Out, and Harmony. So the last piece of this is parent engagement, which is such an important piece. So we want to make sure that we are truly engaging and communicating with our parents throughout this entire school district. And so utilizing communication software such as Talking Points could really and truly help us bridge that gap that we have with so many of the families in our school district. And so what this is a two-way communication system that has 100 different languages where we can actually speak to families in their home language. We also would like to employ 2 district EL translators because there is a need to address the communication gap between schools and families. By employing translators to the school district, we will bridge cultural divides within our community and create stronger ties to our students' parents. This is where Dr. Wolf comes in.
So the plan is really about precision. What we know is that we have to shift the core. We cannot go in August and teach directly to the standards. So part of the bridge standards is identifying 6 essential skills or less that kids need to be able to access where they're about ready to go in. So in 2nd grade, what are those essential skills for them to access 3rd grade? And if they don't have them, we have to reach back to grab those. The other part of the interventions is we have never had equitable interventions in our district. That has never been funded. So we are proposing that we are buying equitable intervention for K through 12 for ELA, math, and social emotional learning. And then certainly our population with EL that's one of our subgroups that is struggling the most in terms of our plan. So we are proposing for consideration this comprehensive plan for $5,577,400. The other thing that I would like to walk in for consideration, I have provided you a survey that we did in needs assessment for a virtual learning program. I really feel like as we get back in August, we are going to have to continue to innovate and provide multiple pathways for kids. I think we heard loud and clear from our teachers, they do not want to do blended and do face-to-face. I've recently heard it called, they don't want a room in Zoom. That did not work across the nation. So we are faced with building out a virtual program. So through that needs assessment, you'll see there's about 38% of high school parents right now that are interested in a virtual option. Middle school's 34, and I think we dropped down to 28. We pulled a group of high school, middle, and elementary principals together to talk to them about what this virtual program would look like. They were pretty adamant that K2 virtual is not a good solution because we have foundational skills that just need to be taught face-to-face, and that is the best option. So what we are proposing tonight is consideration with this money to do startup for a 9 through 12 virtual program that we would be submitting to the state for our own BEDS code, and that is for $2.5 million. We also would like to submit a virtual program that would run grades 3 through 8 for $4.6 million, and that would be designating administration, teachers specifically to the virtual school and program. Any questions?
So, yeah, let me kind of capsulize this from what I'm understanding. K2 is probably something that the virtual is not something that these kids need the fundamentals. They don't learn well virtually. But I guess what I'm thinking about is, were you talking about August start?
An August start.
Okay, so we don't know what COVID is going to look like, but we do know that whether COVID is here or not, we're going to have some children that prefer virtual learning. I don't know what percentage that would be. I would guess anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15% of our 37,000 students. So are we talking about having our own virtual school as opposed to the South Carolina virtual program?
We still could utilize the South Carolina virtual program as a supplement, but we are talking about having our own school, 9 through 12, and then our own program, which would still be our own school. It's just a little different in terms of the statutes in which we will have to put forward for waiver to the state.
I have two questions. First of all, have we estimated the ongoing cost of the school and the program? So I know there's a startup cost, but what's the ongoing cost?
That will be the ongoing cost. So that is going to be the startup, but going forward, that would be the cost that we would have to factor.
So you'd be carrying 6.8 million a year forward. Does that include just curriculum, or is that support teachers and administration?
That includes administration, support staff, teachers. I believe at the 9 through 12, there's 20 teachers, the 3 through 8, 42 teachers, and then curriculum, PD.
So one more, I lied, I guess I have three questions. So the last question is, so the children would be associated with the Berkeley County Virtual School, not the Berkeley High School?
So 9 through 12, they would be under their own separate school under a BEDS code. So that they would be graduating from that virtual school. For the program, they would be associated back to their home school just like we do with alternative school.
How would they qualify? I mean, because just listening to the statistics that she spoke about earlier in terms of what has happened with virtual school and we're dealing with now, how would we recognize these students based on their past performance, or they have the discipline or the skill set to perform like that? Or, just because someone wants to do virtual school, it may not be the best thing for them. So how would we go about assessing that and these students will qualify to be in the virtual school?
We are building out a student profile. Some of the profiles that we've looked at nationally came from really successful virtual schools and then working with parents and counselors. I think it's about making sure that we're matching up learning styles and setting kids up to be successful. What we want this go around is to make sure that we have the right kids in the right seat.
Well, that's absolutely, and because we just mentioned that, K1, 2, whatever is not a good thing. So again, I'm just thinking about some of these students that would just choose to be in virtual school versus can they really perform, or would it be good for us, to help me with that just a little bit more. I mean, you give me some information, but I'm just...
So it really is working with our guidance counselors and our principals to help us to make recommendations along with counseling our parents and trying to make those choices. We can share with you the rubric that we've developed out that identifies students that are successful in a virtual setting, and that would be the rubric that we would be utilizing as we're counseling parents through this process. The other part too is monitoring progress, because if students are not successful in that setting, we have an obligation to get them in the setting that they can be successful in. And so it is that constant monitoring and counseling.
And that would be to move them back into face-to-face in school, or...
Yes.
Okay.
And we do that with SC Virtual, our franchise, so we're very familiar with those processes. It was a little different this year because of COVID.
Dr. Wolf, will there be funds available to test kids before school starts? Kids that you think aren't doing well to begin with at the end of the last year? And will provide for staffing? And of course, I want to ask about our COPE kids. Are they going to be part of this program?
Yes, there will be COPE. Certainly, there is no subgroup that would be excluded. We have to include all students that would be successful in the setting. We are also, and we did not put this up here, but through our own funding, we are going to have a robust summer program. It's not just about remediation, but about engagement, that we need to re-engage and re-excite children in terms of learning.
And will there be counselors available for these kids that are kind of getting dropped in between these 18 months of not being in school before they enter?
We can certainly build that into our program, along with our social emotional supports that will be offered.
Where will the virtual academy be based? Where will the teachers be?
So we've had some discussion about basing them with Ms. Driggers in the technology building, because that makes perfect sense.
It does.
Would the teachers be required to teach in a building, or would there be some flexibility or for them to teach from home?
I think all of those logistics we need to be able to really sit down and talk about. We had planned on bringing a proposal, and we will still bring a proposal March 9th because we have to submit for state waivers if we're going to go this route. And so we'll bring those logistics back.
So the cost is for a 1 year or a 2 year? Because we have to spend this money within a 2 year framework, correct?
It would be for a 1 year.
1 year, okay, so, okay.
But going forward, I mean, this is going to be an additional $6 million, you said, each year, right?
6.8.
Yes, sir.
8 million.
How many children do we think we can serve?
We have projected, we projected over 1,000 in the a little over 1,000 in the 3 through 8 and 300 in the 9 through 12.
So is that 2.5 million, 4 million, is that taken out of the 6.8? You know, what we would always receive for that child? Are we accounting for the money we would already be receiving for that child in this number? I'm sorry.
The allocation of students.
Yeah, so if it's 1,000 students and we get allocated $2,500 a student, is that 2.5 million? We've already spent that 2.5 million and we need 6.8 more, or the 2.5 would reduce the 6.8?
Good question.
You would need the additional cost, because we would have additional allocations for the virtual school. So you would need the additional funds for the program.
For the program?
Yes.
But you still would be having funds for those kids, even if we are serving them through a virtual school, we'll still get their
Yes.
student
yes,
allocation?
Base student cost.
Yes.
Yeah, but I guess what you were saying, Sally, will that money be applied toward the actual cost of funding the virtual school every year? Because if that 1,000 student is not there, so that money is going into that program because they're not in the day-to-day program? I mean, just...
If we start out with the ESER 2 funds for the first 2 years, we would have to incorporate this additional cost within our general fund. Yes.
And
In
that
year
money-
3, yes.
And that money's more likely is going to come from the base student cost per student each year. So if we got about 1,000, whatever number it may be, then going forward, that money will come out of that particular budget to be applied towards
Yes,
the
sir.
virtual
it
school.
will.
Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. How long does this money take you? And when do you actually start putting general fund money in?
Right. And I hate to speak for Kelly, we haven't had this conversation.
Well, you're dealing with the
But I
finance.
think after year 1 and 2, you'll really see, we'll have a good trend and know exactly what it's going to cost and how many allocations we have and how many students we have that are enrolled in the program. And I think it'll be easier to budget in year 3 with exact numbers.
So is the proposal to have double this money come out of the CARES Act or this particular fund?
Well, we didn't have this as part of a proposal. This part was a walk-in, and it's just up for consideration. Because like I said at the beginning, that's one of the pros of having a budget workshop. You don't really have to, you don't approve anything tonight. Everything's up for discussion, so we can add that, and we can remove some other things that I have to present later this evening. It's really up to the board to decide.
I just have a real quick comment. I really appreciate all the planning and effort that's going into trying to figure out to move us forward with the virtual. And I do see where some of it is geared towards the remediation and trying to help a lot of these kids that are failing because virtual and COVID and this whole situation has not worked for them. My number one concern and number one on my agenda is meeting the needs that we currently face. And what I mean is, we know South Carolina, we asked the federal government to waive the testing this year, and the federal government in their great esteemed wisdom said, no, South Carolina, you're going to have to test all your children. And unfortunately, I suspect our numbers are going to be historically low with the amount of failure that our kids are going to show on those tests. So I feel like we may be putting the cart before the horse. This is good planning. This is strategic planning. It's something that Dr. Ingram and this board and many boards always try to do. But again, as far as this board member is concerned, my number one focus and my number one thought is all of these failing kids that we getting ready to find out and how far they are behind. And I know we've had these discussions with the district-wide, but that's really where my head is at. How are we going to address all these kids that are 1 or 2 grade levels below, and then they're going to come back to school and they're just emotionally fragile, they're not ready to learn. So it's, again, I've repeated myself, but it's just that important to me, is that this is great, but this is before, this is not number one what I'm thinking about, but that's just me. Thank you.
But that's what Ms. Piegler presented to us. And I just have to commend you, Ms. Piegler. You're a great motivator. I got excited. I want to come. I'll be there, okay? I'm just saying, that's what Ms. Piegler presented to us. And I have to commend this virtual academy because there are some children that are thriving through the virtual. They're not dealing with the day-to-day, he said, she said, or he likes her and she likes him. So they're not dealing with all that. So they are thriving. And there are some that you're absolutely right.
The test results are going to show the proof.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be very
But
painful.
there are these children that are asking for it. I think it's something worth looking into.
Yeah, so I am very passionate about learning loss. And so the plan that we have here is really about identifying where kids are coming to us and what skills they have and what they do not have, and how we reach down, assess, and we start instruction. That's going to be a major shift. We're going to have 2 shifts. The first is going to be in the core and what we do instructionally and how we reach kids. The second is going to be about our grading practices. And so that's what this whole plan truly is about. The first few lines are just about how we shift the core and how we relieve everything off of a teacher to get down to the essentials of teaching. And I can't say that enough, because that is the only way that we are going to do this. And in Berkeley, I feel like we will do it better with a very precise plan and not have our teachers worry about the test. We're going to be worrying about learning and how we accelerate learning for every single kid in this district. The second year then is about how you layer on intervention, because there's a good saying that says you can never intervene your way out of a bad core, and we have a bad core right now.
And that's my concern is the next step. Like you say, the assessment and figuring out where we're at is very important, but then the intervention is going to cost money. It's going to take a lot of extra resources. I mean, it's just the resources that we have are not going to be enough.
Well, one thing, and I'd ask, thank you, I'm sorry, Mr. Barrow allowed me to speak. I'm really passionate about grading practices, folks. I've preached this in 12 places over 40 years. And I'm not going to take my shoe off, don't worry about it. But I have a little skit where I do. But think about how ludicrous averaging really is. Okay? I've got to learn a skill set. And I'm given a quiz or a test, and I don't do too well the first time. And a lot of kids, and I think the teachers in the room would probably agree with me because they're top-level teachers, sometimes kids and human beings in general will shut down when they experience early failure. Failure is an essential part of learning, okay? So if I go into a typical college classroom like many of you did, and you got a test at the beginning of the year and you made a 70, and then at midterm you made another 70, and then you aced the final, which is comprehensive, but you get a B or a C in the course, even though you mastered the content at the end of the course, then averaging isn't a very smart way to assess grading. And those conversations are very difficult to have, and they really have to come from teachers more so than bureaucrats or people that, I'm a 2-time award-winning teacher, so I was a good teacher at one time, and I think I still am. And I learned early on in my career the damage of averaging grades. Have any of you ever flopped on a pop quiz and then in the margin of your notebook you added up how many hundreds you had to get to make up that zero? Some of you are shaking your heads because you've done it, right? Well, I've done it too. And that's where we have to have a serious re-examination of grading practices. So anyway, I applaud Academics and Innovation for having the discussion. I encourage you to have it going forward because I think a lot of kids are a lot more capable than we give them credit for. And a lot of it is how we assess. I'm not going to get into why South Carolina doesn't use the confidence interval statistically. There's not a psychometrician this side of Mars that would not want us to use the confidence interval when assigning standardized measures, but this state doesn't. And if the test is so important, how come we don't get an item analysis? For 8 years I've spent in this state and I've never gotten an answer except, oh, it's too expensive. It is not. It is running one more report. If the test is that important, then we should be able to know what we get wrong. But we don't know what we get wrong. We just know the raw score. So how can we improve? Instead, we spend millions of dollars on software and things that purportedly are going to improve scores. And that's not the end game here. The end game is teaching our kids and giving them the confidence to be successful adults in life. Diatribe over. Thank you for your indulgence.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Dr. Ingram. I just wanted to point out, Dr. Wolf, that currently we are in basically a remediation mode in all of our schools, and using some of the leftover CARES Act from the first round, we're actually tutoring students during school. Teachers are actually utilizing their planning period. There are tutorials in that regard. There's after school. There's some schools are actually thinking about, if not already implementing, Saturday programs. So, Mr. Ramsey, you're exactly right. There needs to be a multi-pronged approach to this. Starting now, we're actually in the process of doing this now. And the district level folks, supervisors and Dr. Ingram and his staff have worked directly with principals and teachers to make sure that this remediation effort reduces greatly those kids that are going to ultimately fail if they don't have these remediation programs. So I just wanted to put it out there for the public to know that we're not just talking about August. We're talking about now. We're using this CARES Act money now to make sure that our kids who need assistance have that opportunity to make sure that they don't fail and don't become a statistic.
We'll actually have to accelerate.
So we're accelerating and remediating, whatever you want to call it, we're helping kids.
Absolutely.
I would like to see some more focus and effort at the high school level. That's where the most kids are failing and not getting credit. But if you're taking a class where you took the last class in quarantine and got, 2 assignments all of quarantine or 3 assignments all of quarantine, and now you go to the next level class and you're rocking a 55, it's very defeating for kids because they're trying all they have, but they don't have the tools to do the next thing. So I am worried about kids in the, Algebra 2, Spanish 2, English 2, where we needed something in the 1 and we didn't get it, or we needed something in the 2 and now we're in the 3. Because they're high schoolers, we want them to handle it, and they are struggling handling it. Lots of kids in my world, in my space, are struggling handling it. So I don't know how we can also encourage remediation. I feel like elementary school and middle school teachers get really excited about remediation and they go back and they pick up and they see those skills. I feel like in high school, there's so much pressure for a test or a year of the end test or an EOC or something. They're trying to drive out what they have on their list. So I don't know how to encourage high school teachers too, but they're struggling too. And I think the numbers show they're failing classes that they need to graduate.
We can certainly bring this back to our principal teams and teacher teams to devise a program for high school as well.
This is wonderful. Ms. Hardison, Ms. Piegler, amazing work. Thank you. Thank you for thinking of how to solve problems. It's amazing.
Well, thank you, and I do want to take a second to acknowledge some of the teachers who came tonight, who I've talked to and who've been part of the process and helping, and Jason Owens has been instrumental in being in this process and talking, and then I have Jackie Klein, and Sasha McRobbie Dawson, and then Tyler Dawson, and then I forgot about you, Kim Flatt, also here as well, So these guys have been listening to me, and I've been listening to them, and it's been a wonderful experience. I'm not gonna lie, I've really enjoyed diving in and talking to people, and it's been great. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you all for your hard work. Okay, so moving on from academics, we have our technology needs, and they're divided over the next 2 years. Technology needs are also a part of the process that is going to help their plan succeed. The total 2-year request for technology is $9.7 million. On these next 2 slides, our roofing and HVAC needs are spread out over the next 2 years. The first slide is the 21-22 request. As you can see, the request on the 2 slides total $22.6 million. So I'll go to this one. And we would not have enough funds in ESER 2 to cover the entire request. We've narrowed down the highest need, the highest priority in green, and those total $18.2 million. Keep in mind that the projects that are not funded here by the ESER 2 funds will be funded by our upcoming bond issuances. By utilizing this funding source, we'll have the ability to fund additional projects in our bond issuances in September. Diane, did you need to elaborate any more on the facilities? Good. Okay, thank you. So this is a consolidated list of everything that we've talked about this evening, without the virtual school, of course. So the total request for the accelerated program is 5.5. School repairs for HVAC replacements is 8.5. Roof replacements 8.4, and Chromebook replacements is 9.7. And like I said earlier, this is up for discussion. This is not set in stone. I just wanted to show you what a budget, a balanced budget would look like for the 32.2, but we can certainly change this. We can incorporate the virtual school and any other needs. Actually, since I uploaded the presentation, I had a request for temporary employees, attendance SRC clerk, and temporary media assistant for elementary levels. And from the tip line we received, it was reported that we need automatic soap and water in bathrooms and better hand dryers. So I did want to throw that out there since those were requests.
Yes.
But this is up for discussion, so you guys.
Just my comment to start off, it looks pretty strong, because what I like is you're kind of balancing the different needs that we have, and whether it's tweaked one way or the other, or however it is, this was part of what my thought process was, is how y'all have done it as far as recognizing some of the hard assets that will last us for a long time, because part of educating our kids is that the roof not be leaking, Part of educating our kids is that they have the technology, and the Chromebooks do have to be replaced. So the same thing, even as we talk virtually, they got to have, if you don't have the Chromebook, and then if you don't have the internet access, you can have the greatest plans in the world, it's not going to work. So just initially, it looks pretty, I'm pleased with it.
Thank you.
Do we have any 8% money that we could replace Chromebooks with to be able to fund?
Yes, we normally use the 8% money with those bond issuances that we do each September. This would alleviate that pot of money and put it over here so that we could do additional projects and maybe move faster on the 5-year facility plan. That was kind of the thought process there, is that if we move some Chromebooks over to this, then we'll have, because there's more restrictions on this funding source than there is on the 8%, so we could do more with the 8% as far as facility needs.
Could also help the capital projects with the roofing and
Yeah.
HVAC.
Yes, so anything that is presented this evening, so the roofing projects that we prioritized, we had in green, just because they weren't in green means that if we don't spend it on this fund, we're not going to do it. We will definitely put that into our 8% money in September over the next few years.
I was just trying to figure the money for the presentation, like, what would you move off of this list
I
to
would
fund?
take basically the 8.5 and the 8.4 and the 9.7 would free up anything in the 8% money in September. So we could use that for building new schools, adding wings. We could do some bigger ticket items if we use that funding source.
So if you picked one of those to use 8% money on and possibly moved back, that would free up the 6.8 you need for the virtual school.
Absolutely. So if you took 6.8 off of here and put it back to the 8% money, you could do the virtual school. Yes, ma'am.
So what's the timeline, Ms. Smith, for gathering this information and coming back and having some real hard discussions?
I would like to have this by the second meeting in March, if possible.
Or another special meeting?
I would prefer it to be approved.
You could run it through finance.
You
I
could-
would
run
say
it through
take
the-
it through finance and then bring it to the full board you could just take it through finance.
It's probably
Everybody can-
wise.
Everybody can have an opinion.
Right. Are you finished?
I think so.
Thank you very much. That was very informative and a collaborative effort. That's what we're all about. It's not top-down, it's bottom-up, making sure that we incorporate all of our teachers and administrators, district-level folk, board members, to make sure we're doing the right thing, and we salute you for that. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn the special budget.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Ms. Tanner. Is there any discussion? Call for the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Unanimous consent. We are adjourned. Have a great evening.